Hello to everybody. My name is Tom Bilo. I work with UNDP's Finance Sector Hub based here in New York, and it's a great pleasure to be with you to help facilitate this exciting session, really important session, Development in Harmony, aligning private sector impact with public sector goals through SDG reporting. In our work in UNDP, we're certainly realizing how governments are grappling with the repercussions of the pandemic through a recalibration, a revisiting of their national development priorities and targets, driven by, of course, the socioeconomic regression on a number of indicators during the pandemic, as well as the extraordinary fiscal constraints that many countries have to bear. And this is giving rise to a whole new generation of medium-term development plans across the world. And these plans are opportunities, as well as being born out of the constraints of the pandemic. They give birth to opportunities for charting a course to a more resilient future. And the Sustainable Development Goals, in our view, provide a roadmap towards that more resilient future, a future where we can be less vulnerable to these types of pandemic, where we are grappling more systematically with the challenges of climate change and dealing with the ever-increasing challenge of inequity. So as governments are developing these new medium-term development plans, they too are having to develop new financing strategies for these plans. Again, in a fiscally constrained environment, the question is now about how to mobilize additional resources and how to align existing resources in a more efficient and effective way with development priorities. We're supporting around about 70 countries at the moment in developing these types of financing strategy, often called integrated national financing frameworks. And a core feature of these financing approaches is the criticality of the private sector, how public finance alone cannot achieve the sustainable development trajectory we all are pursuing, but how private capital, private businesses, and the models that they work under must also be aligned to the SDGs for us to make progress. There are many exciting innovations in this space, and critical to taking this more systematic approach across public and private sectors is reporting, how to track and report on both public and private flows of finance as they relate to the SDGs. And we'll be hearing in this session a number of perspectives on the importance of that form of SDG reporting. I know that in Bangladesh, the government is working hand in hand with the private sector around a new financing strategy for their national plan. I know in Colombia, there is a great effort around an integrated national financing framework to put in place both public accounting for budget in respect to the SDGs, as well as private sector and corporate tracking in relation to the SDGs. There's a lot out there. A question I'm sure we'll address is how can we promote more coherence and interoperability across these different reporting initiatives. And I'm sure by the end of our exciting panel, we'll have lots of ideas for how we can move forward together with this. So I'm going to pause there, and I'm going to just let you know that we're going to have a panel discussion, which will involve a bit of toing and froing across the excellent panelists that we have with us. We'll also have a video, and if there's time, which I hope there will be, we'll get into some Q&A with the audience. I do hope we have time for that. So I'm asking the panelists to try and keep their remarks to less than 5 minutes for each question that I ask. And I'm going to start with Mr. Marcel Regis, who is the president of Bavaria. Hi, Marcel. Good to see you there. Welcome.
Hey, Tom, how are you?
Yeah, good. Really excited to talk to you. I know that Bavaria is one of the pioneering businesses in Colombia, starting reporting on the SDGs. And I know you've joined the business call to action, which is great, with an inclusive business initiative to improve living conditions and incomes of low-income women retailers in Colombia, which sounds fantastic. I wanted to ask, frankly, why is this a priority for your organization? And what have you gained along the way from undertaking this work? Over to you, Marcel.
Thank you for the question, Tom. Hi, everyone. Good afternoon to everyone, to my fellow panelists, and of course to you, Tom. It's really a pleasure to be here representing Bavaria, the largest brewer in Colombia and part of the AB InBev family. Let me start saying, Tom, that Bavaria is deeply committed to the economic, social, and environmental development of Colombia. We understand the importance of working together, as you were saying, again, and align with the global and the local agenda through the SDG framework. Our strategy is mainly focused on 6 sustainability pillars: water, agriculture, circular packaging, climate action, smart drinking, and entrepreneurship. Pillars that are 100% part of our value chain. So in this last pillar, entrepreneurship, we have a program called Emprendedoras Bavaria, which demonstrates clearly the importance for our organization, as well as what we have gained throughout the process. This program is focused on empowering female business owners in vulnerable communities through the increase of their income and the development of their capabilities. Just as an example, since 2017, Tom, we have reached more than 40,000 small retailers across Colombia. Women that participated in our program have not only increased their income by 26%, but they also have 20% more chance of obtaining credit, as for instance. Through Emprendedoras Bavaria, we have created closer relationships with the national government and other private sector companies. This year, the government matches every dollar we invest in our program. That's awesome. And I'm also glad to share that UNDP Colombia is part of the program with our e-learning platform. So in summary, Tom, this is what we have gained along the process: partnerships and ecosystem that help us to create a greater impact for our communities.
Well, thank you so much, Marcel. That is really inspiring. It's great to hear a company that talks about its development impacts alongside, of course, its economic impacts and financial impacts. It's great to hear, and wonderful to hear the importance of partnerships in taking forward this approach. Marcel, I'm going to come back to you later and find out more about what you're up to there with Bavaria, but I'm going to stay in Colombia but move now to the government, and I'm hoping Maria Fernanda is with us. We had some difficulties. Are you there, Maria Fernanda? There you are.
Yes,
welcome.
I'm listening to you. Yeah, thank you for the
Welcome.
patience. It was a little bit hard.
No problem. I just wanted to introduce you, Maria Fernanda. You're the Director Evaluation of Public Policies in the National Planning Department in Colombia, and it's a real honor to have you here with us. And it's great that we've gone from the corporate sector right now into government. And I was going to ask you on that note, Maria Fernanda, how is the government of Colombia enhancing public and private sector coordination to drive investment in the SDGs?
Well, I'm going to go through a series of things that we have done here in Colombia. First, we integrated the whole SDG agenda into our public policy planning tools. Very important to know that we integrated them in the last two national planning instruments that we have, which is each government. So right now we have more than 80% of the indicators of the current development plan associated with the SDGs. So that implies that the government is really working on those SDGs. And also with that, we also have something that is called the document compass, which is an instrument we have in Colombia. It is the number 3918 for those who want to research about it. And it's a roadmap of the SDGs in Colombia. It's how we are becoming responsible to accomplish the agenda. It has a strategy of mobilization of actors and resources, and we have been implementing it in the last years, since 2018. And also recently in 2020, from the SDG Commission's Technical Secretariat, we have a new instrument that is called the SDG Corporate Tracker, which is, I think, something that if you are really interested in knowing how we are doing that. This corporate tracker is a multi-stakeholder initiative, which is seeking to measure the business sector in contributing to the fulfillment of the SDGs. Right now, we have more than 3 active companies which are registered and are giving us information related to these companies contributing to the SDGs. So we have this platform to strengthen this national reporting on this 2030 agenda. Also, we have something else which is really interesting. We are working in a structure of the integrated national financial framework, because we want to have this track on how in the medium term we are really investing on the SDGs. And so we are identifying budgets, financial gaps, and we have been working on this with UNDP, with UN Women, with UNICEF. So we have very, very active work on this integrated national financial framework. And finally, in this track that the government is doing regarding to the private sector, we have worked along with the UNDP in identifying investment opportunities. So we have this SDG investor map. So right now, as a result of that map, we have 22 opportunities in 7 sectors. So we have a huge ecosystem of people, and not only government, but also involved in the private, working on the SDGs agenda.
Well, thank you, Maria Fernanda. That is an impressive portfolio of work that you've outlined there, bringing the SDGs into your planning instruments, the SDG corporate tracker, the integrated financing framework, and then the very interesting initiative about identifying SDG investment opportunities with the private sector. So, look, if the SDGs do provide a roadmap towards greater resilience, it certainly sounds like Colombia, both corporately in the private sector and public sector, is pursuing that roadmap. I'm going to pass over now to Mr. Peter Paul van Weiss. I hope you're there. Hi there, Peter Paul.
Hi,
Peter
Tom.
Paul he is the Chief External Affairs Officer at Global Reporting Initiative, and it's great to have you, Peter. I wanted to ask you, what are the challenges in standardizing all these different private sector reporting initiatives that are out there around the SDGs? What are some of the challenges, Peter Paul?
Thank you. First of all, good morning, good evening, and good afternoon to all of you. It is an absolute pleasure to be on this panel with our friends and trailblazers on this topic. We've worked extensively with UNDP and the government of Colombia, so it's my pleasure, absolute pleasure to be here. So Tom, if I look at your question, I think we need to look at it from 2 different vantage points. First of all, from the SDGs, and then secondly, from the company perspective. So if you start with the SDGs, I think there's 17 SDGs and there are 169 targets, and they provide a common framework and a shared purpose for governments and the broader society for addressing sustainability challenges. And we all agree on that, and it's been extremely useful for leading discussions globally and really making progress. However, I think it's important to understand that they were never developed with the private sector specifically in mind. This will lead to some challenges when we get to the reporting. And specifically, if you think about the fact the targets that are in the SDGs are actually not complemented with specific disclosure requirements. Secondly, they are not covering all the topics that companies and responsible companies care or should care about. And then finally, the SDGs are, and this is a big problem from a company perspective, are time limited. Basically, they run to 2023, and I know, thank God, there is a discussion to extend them, and there'll be something behind it. But from a private enterprise perspective, that's a very relatively short deadline to work towards. So there's a bit of a mismatch from that side when you start thinking about reporting on the SDGs. Now, look at this from a company perspective. And I'm going to start with a somewhat controversial statement, but I'll hopefully address it later, and I'll put your mind to rest again. But despite of an ever-growing realization also among business that they share a responsibility to create a sustainable future, reality is there was only a limited sense of ownership in the private sector for the actual SDGs. And part of the reasons I listed above, including the time-bound challenges and not covering all the topics, but also because, I know it's pity, but it's still true, a part of the business at large was not involved in setting the targets and felt left out of the process. So limited sense of ownership. Second challenge, and this is a bigger challenge from a practical perspective, is that companies over the past 25 years have increased their non-financial reporting systems based on specific company, stakeholder needs, legal requirements, and voluntary commitments made by companies or through industry associations. So the practical and financial implications of altering their reporting systems to address these time-bound SDGs is not necessarily very attractive from the outset for the companies. That's the bad news. I think the good news is things have changed. Because even though companies started looking at this as mainly a PR exercise and initially turned the SDGs on the head and only used it as a framework for telling a good story, it's now changed. They really have understood that they are part of the solution and as well as potentially part of the problem, and that reporting on their impacts is absolutely essential for them to grow and build a sustainable business, but also be part of the sustainable future. And in some part, we at GRI, along with UN Global Compact, Shift, and PricewaterhouseCoopers have helped a little bit with it, and we're proud of that. We've been able to show that SDG reporting and existing non-financial reporting efforts are actually not mutually exclusive. That existing reporting frameworks can be used to report on the impacts on the SDGs. And we, for example, matched all the 169 targets with specific disclosures that already exist in existing reporting frameworks, and showed how companies can use those existing activities to actually report on their impacts on the SDGs. Not only giving them the tools to deal with the SDGs question, but also addressing the always existing feeling within companies that the reporting burden is getting bigger, and do we need to do more? And we actually have been able to, with the help of the UN Global Compact, for example, be able to show that no, it's not the case. What you're doing can be used to report on the SDGs. So broadly, we see a change in attitude in business and an acceptance that, as what my old boss at the World Business Council used to call, business can't succeed in a society that fails. So today, businesses around the world have embraced the SDGs for what they are, a framework that allows companies to engage with stakeholders around the challenges of today. So Tom, let me close by saying that rather than getting hung up on all these challenges that I just outlined, I think we see, and I would encourage everybody and all companies to start reporting and start looking at the SDGs as an opportunity. And I think that luckily that's what we see. Let me leave it at that for now.
Thanks, Peter, Paul. It's great to hear you begin with the challenges and close off on the opportunities. And I really like the way of framing the SDGs as a way of joining in on the development priorities that our countries face. I think that's a really nice way of looking at it. So thanks, That was great, Peter Paul. I'm going to sort of come back also now to Marcel on some of the challenges and opportunities. Marcel, if I can, because I'd like to know, moving from Peter Paul's sort of macro view to the view from your company, from Bavaria, what have been the challenges and opportunities in your efforts to report and measure performance against the SDGs? Marcel, over to you.
Thank you for your question, Tom. As I mentioned before, our 6 sustainability pillars are aligned with the SDGs, right? So to be honest, after implementing the process of collecting, measuring, and reporting the data, these actions become part of the natural process of our programs. So I really don't see a big challenge in there, to be completely honest. Where I do see an opportunity, Tom, it is in how we can become key actors in our network, influencing and motivating companies that are part of our value chain to start reporting alongside with us. Last month, as an example, we had our VPs of Corporate Affairs and Procurement meeting over 100 suppliers, sharing our best practice in reporting and inspiring them to start their process. We know that when you think about a small company, this is not an easy task to start due to the lack of resources or capabilities in the small and medium, in some medium-sized companies. So we have a very important role in our point of view to inspire them, right? So having said that, just as a summary, I truly believe that the biggest opportunity that we large organizations have is to inspire others to be part of this journey and to make their businesses more sustainable. That's my point of view, Tom.
Great, thanks, Marcel. I think that point around integration, avoiding that burden also that Peter Paul had raised, that perhaps some might see this as additional reporting burden, but the way you put it was that it have reinforced your own pillars of sustainability, I think you called them. And then, what I really liked again was this point around inviting others, bringing the SDGs down the supply chains to your partners, even at the small and medium enterprise level, because of course it requires us all to do it for it to be truly transformative and have impact at scale. So really inspiring, Marcel. Thank you so much. I'm going to move on now back to you, Maria Fernanda. I can't see you for some reason. It may be that you've slipped away briefly, or there you are. Hello.
I'm here. I'm listening.
Hi, good to see you again. Maria Fernanda, in your experience, what were the key drivers that resulted in the successful implementation of the SDG corporate tracker, which you mentioned earlier? Can you tell us?
Yes, of course. I'm going to summarize how this sprint has been in Colombia. First of all, it's very important to highlight that it is a multi-sectoral approach. So we have better stakeholders, better alliances that are focusing on giving resources, like not only like physical resources, but also people that is engaged on this kind of tracking, which is the SDGs in our case. But we have 3 main things that result in this successful experience. The first one is that we made this SDG corporate tracker an opportunity for the companies. So what we offer to them, and when we decided the platform, we thought about it as something that is going to solve a problem for the companies. So we use this report that is from PricewaterhouseCoopers, which is creating a strategy for the water world, and we discovered that more than 72% of the companies mentioned the SDGs, but just 1% measure their performance and how they develop these contributions, and how this is a little bit like what Marcel told us before. So we saw that they have an opportunity, and this opened a huge door, because there is this 99% of companies that are not reporting anything. So we come with this technological platform, and the companies can report there, and they will be able to align to a report that is standardized, and they can align also their goals with whatever the SDGs they are pursuing. And this is really nice also for the government, because we can consolidate information about the private sector, which is not easy for us. Sometimes putting all the companies together is difficult. So we have a really good example in our last national voluntary report. We have a specific chapter on private sector contribution, and it was fitted by the platform. A second thing that I want to mention is that it is a concrete example of the power of partnerships. So it is not only the Colombian government, it is not only the National Planning Department where we work, but it's also INDP, the Business Call to Action, and Global Reporting Institute giving us input to push this initiative forward and identifying opportunities. So right now we have more than 10 allies behind this corporate tracker, and with the contribution we are arriving to more than 300 companies reporting constantly. And the third thing that I want to mention is that the companies can access the platform, and that we are going to collect data through the platform, but it's going to be in a standardized way. So they can also use this information, which has already international standards. So the companies there can use a easy report, and they can also use that report over there in our platform for their social and their compromises with the SDG. So we really think that this was a great opportunity, that we have achieved the goal of compromising many stakeholders. And I guess that in the coming future, for the future reports, we are going to have more robust and more important information that we can also discuss with the private sector, which is really, really nice to have them on board.
Great, thank you so much, Maria Fernanda. That was really enlightening, and I really think that focus on the multi-stakeholder nature of this endeavor is important. And I wanted to also bring that up with you, Peter Paul, if I can. I wanted to ask you what role multi-stakeholder partnerships play in relation to bringing transparency to corporate reporting, and perhaps moving the needle towards actually increasing sustainable finance allocations. Peter Paul, can you help us out?
I'll do my best, Tom. I think I'm back.
You certainly are. That was frightening, but we're now back together, although minus Maria Fernanda, I fear. But Peter Paul, do you mind just restarting your response? Hopefully you can remember the question.
I can remember the question, Tom, about the role of multi-stakeholder partnerships in transparency, and also the move towards increased sustainable finance allocation.
Yes.
So Tom, yes, I think multi-stakeholder partnerships are unquestionably key to achieving the 2030 agenda. Government, civil society, or business cannot successfully deliver on the 17 SDGs in silos. We have to work together. It requires concerted actions, because only when stakeholders regularly and respectfully interact can progress be made. It's the basis of which, for example, GRI is based. We develop our standards through a very thorough multi-stakeholder process, enabling companies to report their impacts and care about the language in a language they understand, but also ensuring that actually what they report, and this goes back then to the SDGs, is in line with the expectations of those stakeholders. It's one thing for a company to decide what they want to report, and it's much more important that we actually, as a standard setter, but as a company, that you report on things that people want to know and need to know to make informed decisions. So multi-stakeholder in terms of collaboration, in terms of conversation between all the stakeholders, and also in terms of determining what needs to be discussed by when and in what format. Now, let me share maybe a few examples of impactful multi-stakeholder partnerships that we are engaging in to bring information on business impact and contributions to the SDGs into the SDG review process. The first one that I was going to highlight, and I'll spend not too much time on it, is already been actively discussed also by Maria Fernanda, is the work we've done with the Business Call to Action and the National Planning Department of Colombia, focusing on measuring this private sector contribution through the SDG Corporate Tracker, an online platform which is aligned with the GRI standards, thereby making it easier for companies to actually assess how they're contributing towards achieving SDGs and using tools like the GRI standards that they already have implemented at the organizations. And this will allow the now over 400 companies to standardize the collection of data, analyze the users to analyze the data by sector and size and region, so really track the progress. And again, it's not about the reporting itself. It's not about collecting it in the data. It's what that corporate tracker data allows the multi-stakeholders to do. It allows and enables a conversation about impacts, what's good, what's not good, what needs to be addressed first and second. A similar tool to track business progress towards the SDGs has been developed in Peru, and we're now talking with UNDP. And actually, before this call, we were talking about how we can further scale this initiative and share our learnings with other countries. Similarly, in Bangladesh, we are collaborating with the UN Development Programme and the Bangladesh Garment Manufacturers and Experts Association on a report exploring the impact of the ready-made garment sector on the national priority indicators. This was established by the government of Bangladesh and also linked it to the SDGs. The report really highlights the overall impact and contribution of the ready-made garment sector to the MPIs and the SDGs by collecting this SDG-related business data, which was already disclosed by companies, but by bringing it together. And we're currently discussing how to scale this up further and including 100 factories by the end of this year and many more in the future. Now, in closing, you also asked about the link with sustainable finance allocation. And what we see, and this is not linked to just the SDGs, but we see around the world that transparency about sustainability impacts and actions really provides access to capital. More and more investors are beginning to take their understanding of sustainability impacts into their decision-making process. And this is not, we're not talking about niche investors anymore. This is not your green bonds or what have you. This is across the board. Major providers of capital are looking at the sustainability impacts from their investments. So this is very good. So availability and access to comparable reporting data on impacts and also on the impact of SDG is key. And that's why we're very keen to be engaged in all these processes and projects. Tom, back to you.
Well, thanks so much, Peter Paul. That was a bit unfair. I asked two questions in one, but you managed to respond very effectively to both. And I've certainly learned a lot and was very excited by the Bangladesh example you provided as well, and your commitment and enthusiasm for going to scale, which I think has got to be the theme of this work, going to scale. Now, our colleague from Bangladesh, Ms. Zuena Aziz, who is the Chief Coordinator for the Sustainable Development Goals Affairs in the Prime Minister's Office of Bangladesh, was unfortunately unable to join simply because it's way too late. It's the middle of the night in Bangladesh, but she very kindly recorded a video for us. So while we're all preparing, because we will have a few minutes for Q&A, while we're preparing some difficult, challenging questions for our panelists or some easy and illuminating perspectives that you might want to bring, please enjoy the video of Ms. Aziz's remarks, which she provides for us, I believe, now. If we could move to the video, please.
Respected participants, Assalamu alaikum and good evening from Dhaka. As we step in the decade of action for achieving SDGs, accelerating investment both from the public and private sector resources is extremely important. Bangladesh has made its mark by completing the Development Finance Assessment in 2016. As one of the first 40 countries following the first generation DFA. However, in the first DFA, a roadmap to identify the steps needed to stimulate the private investments in the sustainability area was yet to be structured. Our Honorable Prime Minister has a vision to transform Bangladesh into a developed country by 2041. Accordingly, the latest approved 8th five-year plan has endorsed the private sector-led growth strategies. The government has now decided to update the DFA and the financing strategy, incorporating an integrated public-private approach to SDG financing with a focus on the private sector sustainability investment roadmap. This is done under the umbrella of the Integrated National Financing Framework initiative to boost public and private finance with technical support from the UNDP together with sister UN agencies. To achieve this goal, the government is setting up governance and coordination mechanism taking representatives from the government and the private sector. According to the SDG financing strategy of Bangladesh, it has been estimated that the government will have to mobilize additional funds of $928 billion to implement SDGs by 2030. The share of the private sector is estimated to be 42%. With a view to executing the 8th five-year plan and also to achieve the SDGs, social and environmental challenges have to be solved through market-driven business opportunities. Hence, to achieve the goals, it is fundamentally important to build a concrete pipeline of SDG-aligned investable projects. Moreover, we have to understand the financing mechanism that can boost the attainments of our national priorities as well. Only the inclusive participation of the government, private sectors, and civil society will ensure the timely implementation of the SDGs. To make this possible, tracking both public and private sector contribution to SDGs is paramount. The better the data, the better the planning strategies, government interventions, and private investment. Under the visionary and prudent leadership of Honorable Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina, the government is committed to upholding Bangladesh well-tracked progress towards SDGs attainment within the stipulated time despite the challenges posed by COVID-19. The SDG tracker introduced by the government not only facilitates the monitoring of SDG results, but also helps to identify investment priority areas. With the assistance from the BCMA, UNDP and Global Reporting Initiative, Bangladesh published the first sector-wide SDG Impact Management Report. The report shows how the ready-made garment sector not only contributes to economic development, but also to SDG achievement. It provides employment, supports healthcare of the workforce, invests in upskilling the workforce, adopts resource recycling, increasingly uses renewable energy, and so on. This report is the first of its kind from the private sector in Bangladesh. We hope and believe that this very initiative of BGMA, UNDP and GRI will encourage other private sectors to come forward and report their social, economic and environmental impact. This is why we are already planning the scale-up phase that will include 100 factories by the end of this year and many more in the future. The scale-up, we are simplifying and digitizing the progress inspired by the digital solution of our SDG tracker. Finally, I want to emphasize that sustainability reporting is a means to an end. Boosting and scaling sustainability reporting will help us to have a comprehensive picture of our progress against the SDGs and to align planning and policy process to foster more effective SDG attainment. Thank you.
Great. Well, that was fantastic. I'm sorry if there was a little stalling on the video there, but wonderful to hear the perspective from our colleagues in Bangladesh, where they are taking forward their integrated national financing framework and this very exciting initiative with GRI and the Bangladesh Garment Association. Now, we've had a couple of questions come in, and I would like to put one of the questions which was directed to Peter Paul, but I'm going to direct it both to Peter Paul and to Marcel, because it's a question about the private sector and for the private sector. And the question is, in the context of the pandemic, how can we convince the private sector to report on the SDGs when bottom lines are hit so hard? So, Peter Paul, if you could just give us a minute or two on that, and then Marcel, it would be great to hear from you as well. And then I have another question for you, Maria Fernanda, more specifically for you. So I'll come to you in a minute. Over to you, Peter Paul.
Okay, thank you, Tom. And this is a very interesting question. And I think what we need to start with is considering long-term and short-term. Yes, bottom lines are hit short-term by the pandemic, but well, first of all, the good news is we actually see an economic recovery in most parts of the world quicker than anybody has expected. And I'm not taking away any of the pain, because there has been real and serious pain. But I think actually the pandemic, what it showed more than before, is proved that point that companies need to start thinking about future-proofing themselves. And I think reporting is an element of that, because it will do two things, or three things, if you will. Well, first of all, as reporting on the SDGs will help also identify new business opportunities. And I think that's under reviewed in a lot of conversations, but the SDGs bring a huge set of new initiatives and business opportunities that I think need to be explored. But secondly, as I said in my answer earlier, we see that reporting and being honest about your impacts will lead to access to finance and access to markets. More and more markets, the EU being the biggest one, but I see other countries where transparency and mandatory reporting are market entry requirements. So for a company that's future-proofing themselves, opportunities, market access, and access to finance are three key arguments for reporting on SDGs and on their impacts at large.
Thanks, Peter Paul. What about Marcel? What are your perspectives on this from a private sector organization?
No, that's a great question, Tom. And I think, to be completely honest, our role within the pandemic, Tom, is to go even further in our role in society, right? From I think we've been here in Colombia for 132 years. Bavaria has been here for 132 years, and we'll stay longer. And we want to do the right things. So from our point of view, the pandemic made us impact community even more, right? So from donating food to communities that need it, but also, Tom, building with partners, as always, a hospital in Colombia to help COVID. More than that, we came up with a platform, as an example, completely connect to our ecosystem, which was to help small retailers in Colombia to deliver food to the homes of Colombia, because everything was shut down and everyone could only order from phone or e-commerce. So again, from our point of view, Tom, I think we need to go to do even more in situations like we had last year. So I don't see that we need to stop doing things. I see that we need to go even further, because we are not here for the short term. I think the companies are here for the long term, and that's where we see the value of the companies.
Great. Well, thanks to both of you, Peter, Paul, and to you, Marcel, for I think some really strong arguments for why actually this is not something that is only relevant when times are good, but actually something that's particularly important when times are a bit rough. And we all know that that's an understatement in terms of the context that many have endured through the pandemic. But I think your call for action is well heard, certainly here in this panel and with this group. So thanks for that. I'm going to move now to you, Maria Fernanda, if that's okay, because there's a question around how the government can work with the sorts of local partners. In fact, that I know Marcel was talking about small and medium enterprises as important partners and actors in the economy and bringing SDGs into their ways of working. How, from a government perspective, can we work with local partners to advance progress on the SDGs? Maria Fernanda, over to you.
Thank you, Tom. Well, here I'm going to mention two things. First of all, I talked about at the beginning about a document that we have, like the roadmap of the SDGs, that is called the Compass 3918, which is how we call it. And there we have two things in the local governments. One of them is when we work with the local governments that were elected, and we have a platform just for them to include the SDGs when they were planning what they were going to do during the government period. But there is also something else in that partnership, or in that inclusion of the SDGs. We also went to the different provinces in Colombia to promote this partnership between the private sector and the local government. So many of these 300 that we mentioned companies are already included in the local governments. So, for instance, there is a really specific example of the Pacific region in Colombia, in one of the biggest cities, which is called Cali, and they already have some private companies included in this SDG corporate tracker. So they are also working with local governments. So as you can see, this is just a small example of how we connect everything behind. So it is not that that simple, but I think we are just enlarging our group of partners, so we can have together several ways of seeing the SDGs. The agenda goes through the government, local and the central government, but also is transmitted to the companies and the private sector in these areas. And when you are planning your government agenda, you can include many details on how to reach these goals. So I guess that we are going to see more of these results in the coming years, because then the local governments in Colombia started it back in 2020, last year, and they have been living in the middle of the pandemic. So This is going to be, I think, result that we will see in the next 2 or 3 years, as Marcel was mentioning on his company. So we are going to see some similar experiences towards government, local governments accomplishing things with the private sector in the regions.
That's great. Thank you so much, Maria Fernanda, for responding to that question. Now, I'm going to, as moderator, just ask each of you for just 30 seconds. And you know, the business call to action is a call to action. And so I'm going to ask you what you think coming out of this discussion on reporting is the one call to action that you would encourage all of us to be taking forward as we move this agenda. You've mentioned many actions and there's a lot to do, I realize that, but I'm just asking you for one, each of you, and just to be brief, but no doubt you will inspire us. I'm going to go in the original order that we had for our speakers. So it'll be Marcel, then Maria Fernanda, and then Peter Paul. Marcel, what one call to action do you have for us?
30 seconds. Don't worry. I'll keep the time. No, Tom, great questions. In my point of view, I think the companies really need not only to report, to measure, to be within the tracker, but to inspire others. So my invitation here is to the other companies to share the practices, to make sure that you really inspire others. We have a really a huge ecosystem, the supply chain within many companies. So my request here and my ask to my colleagues from other companies is to really inspire the smaller and medium companies to make sure to be part of this journey.
Great, thank you so much. So Maria Fernanda, your one call to action.
I think very aligned with Marcel. We think that if we visualize the contribution of the private sector to the commitment of the 2030 agenda, and by adopting these sustainability strategies, we will get a society that owns the agenda and is part of the daily tasks what we are doing. So we really think that it is really necessary to show what we are doing and to share with each other how we are achieving things, and as Marcel mentions, to keep up the good practices that has been developed before.
Thank you so much, Maria Fernanda. That's incredibly helpful. Peter Paul.
Thank you, Tom. I'm going to turn it around. So we heard Marcel and Maria talk about, Maria Fernanda, sorry, talk about the sharing and getting other companies to do more. How would I basically turn that around, and I would like to ask the business call to action, the government of Colombia and the government of Bangladesh, who are leaders in this field, share your knowledge with other countries, get to scale. We need to get to scale. And then we can have Marcel and his company as examples in those countries where we need to get to scale, not just in one country, and that's fantastic, but we also need to get more countries. So that will be my call to action for you guys.
Well, I have been inspired. I'm sure all the participants have been inspired. I think we've heard really eloquently from our panelists, so great thanks to all of you. We've heard around how the SDGs perhaps provide us with a scaffolding around which to promote engagement across sectors, and how within the private sector, the SDGs provide a scaffolding to reach out to even the smaller businesses in our communities. And this scaffolding really is for us to construct a common agenda. And I think we heard really very convincingly how the COVID environment, the pandemic, the repercussions from the pandemic have all actually made it clearer that we need a common agenda that drives us towards a more resilient future. a future that we all want, whether we're businesses or governments or citizens, a future where we are not vulnerable in the ways that we have been to this pandemic. But we've heard also that the SDGs, they're not alien, they're not from out of space, they actually make sense, even in the core business models of the private sector. And so the SDG reporting has bared most fruit when it integrates within existing systems of reporting and strengthens the alignment of business operations behind these principles of sustainability. And I think, though, we've heard that there's a challenge moving forward, that we need to continue to get more and more robust in terms of our reporting frameworks, in terms of the coherence across reporting frameworks, and that will enable us to actually go beyond reporting and towards, as it was said earlier, moving the needle, actually promoting at scale investment in sustainable developments, incorporating the metrics of development in project design and pipelines. I must say that from UNDP's side, it's an absolute privilege to work with all of you, the champions on our panel, but also the champions we can't see that I know are in the audience. I think we've been asked by our panelists in a very strong call to action as we leave this meeting to go forth and inspire others to take this work forward. And that really is our challenge and call to action for the future. Let's take this to scale. So thank you so much to all the colleagues. It's been a wonderful opportunity to learn from you. And I look forward in the future one day to meeting you in person and exploring further the wonderful work that you do. So great thanks to everyone. And with that, I think we close and hand back to the organizer. Goodbye.
Bye, Tom. Thanks.